So let's get right into it. If you're stepping into a leadership role or you're trying to, you know that feeling, right? That constant nagging pressure to prove that you belong, to prove your worth. And honestly, it's just exhausting.
And it's such a common trap to fall into. You're putting in all the effort, you're working late, you're speaking up in meetings, you're giving it everything. But for some reason, it feels like it just isn't landing. Like your effort isn't turning into actual influence or recognition. You're performing value, but no one seems to be perceiving it. And that's really the heart of what we're exploring here today. You've got performed value on one side, which feels effortful, anxious, like you're always chasing something. And then you have perceived value on the other. And this feels effortless, centered. It actually attracts respect to you. The big secret here is that real high-level value isn't something you perform. It's something others perceive. This quote really says it all. Your leadership presence, your gravity, it has very little to do with your resume or how many big words you know. It's actually communicated through these tiny, silent signals of self-regulation that people pick up on subconsciously, way before you even open your mouth. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the leadership perception gap. Then we'll get into composure under pressure and the language of presence. After that, the power of restraint. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with your leadership anchor. Okay, let's kick things off with section 1. You have to understand that every time you walk into a meeting or any high-stakes conversation, there's a whole other conversation happening just beneath the surface. People are subconsciously figuring out where everyone fits. We can call this a status exchange. And look, this has nothing to do with your job title or where you are on the org chart. It's a gut-level assessment of who is the most calm, the most composed, the most regulated person in that room. And whoever that is, that's the person who holds the influence. Which brings us to our first silent habit, being totally okay with being misunderstood sometimes. Now, when someone gets you wrong, the low-status reaction is to panic and rush in to over-explain to defend yourself. But a high-value leader, they do something very different. They pause, and they ask themselves, does this misunderstanding actually matter? If it does, they'll offer a calm, brief clarification. If it doesn't, they just let it go. You know why? Because rushing to explain screams, I need your approval. But calmly assessing the situation, that signals that you are the source of your own value. And everyone's brain in that room equates that quiet certainty with authority.
All right, moving on to section 2, composure under pressure. This is all about what you do when you're put on the spot, when you're directly challenged.
Just picture it. You're in a huge meeting, presenting your work, and somebody just rips into your data with a sharp question. The gut instinct is to fire back an answer immediately, right? To defend? Well, the second silent habit is to master the micropause. It could be as simple as taking a slow drink of water. You just take a breath, you give your brain a second to catch up, and then you deliver a calm, measured answer. That tiny 2-second delay, it is everything.
Because that little pause, it signals total executive control. It shows you aren't rattled, you're not threatened, and in that moment, the most regulated person in the room quietly wins the invisible power dynamic. Your composure literally becomes your power. And this whole idea of regulation flows perfectly into our third section, the language of presence. Because like we said, long before your words come out, your body is already telling its own story. An anxious nervous system always leaks the truth. When we feel that pressure, what happens? Our speech gets faster. We start shifting around in our chair, we blink more. Some of us start talking way too much just to hold the floor, or we interrupt other people to get our idea in. These are all subconscious signals that our fight or flight response has been triggered, that we feel threatened. So what's the antidote to all that nervous energy? It's just one word: stillness. High-value leaders consciously practice physical stillness. They slow their breathing down, they relax their jaw, they use minimal, deliberate gestures. This strips away all those signals of threat detection. You know, what we often call presence or charisma? It's often just good old-fashioned nervous system discipline. It's a type of calm that just naturally pulls people in.
Let's move on to section 4, the power of restraint. Here, we're shifting gears a little bit, from how you act in the moment to how you protect your most valuable resources, your time and your energy.
So the next habit is all about withholding your immediate availability. I mean, think about it in basic economic terms. If you're available instantly, all the time, it signals there's a huge supply of you, which naturally lowers your perceived value. But structured availability?
That signals your time is a scarce and valuable resource. Let me give you a real-world example. Low-value behavior is when you let every single email, every got-a-minute request, completely reshape your day. You're constantly reacting. High-value behavior means you operate from a place of deliberate choice. You block out focus time on your calendar and you protect it. You don't feel that compulsive need to reply to messages the second they arrive. It's your boundaries that signal your value. And this all builds up to the ultimate habit of restraint, being genuinely willing to walk away from a bad deal. Let's say you have a colleague who's always reactive or disrespectful. The low-value move is to argue, to try and force a resolution, to burn all your energy on them. The high-value move? You just detach. And I don't mean storming off. I mean calmly recognizing that you don't need their approval or their validation. That quiet detachment signals abundance, and believe me, it rewires the entire power dynamic instantly. Okay, we've made it to our final section. Let's bring all these habits home and talk about the one single internal skill that is the engine behind all of this.
At the end of the day, it all boils down to one thing: self-regulation. And this isn't about being robotic or emotionless. It's the ability to manage your own internal world, your emotional spikes, your knee-jerk reactions, your words, your time. When you can stabilize your own identity on the inside, you start to project this composed authority on the outside without even thinking about it.
So you see, the path to real influence always starts internally, with self-regulation. That becomes your psychological anchor in any storm. From that solid anchor, you naturally earn external trust and respect. And the result of all that work is a kind of effortless presence that can command a room without you ever having to say a thing.
So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this: stop performing, stop chasing, stop leaking that sense of urgency and neediness. True leadership presence isn't a mask you put on. It's what people perceive because of the solid, centered, regulated foundation you've built inside yourself. And that really just leaves us with one last important question to think about. In every single interaction, you are silently communicating your value or your lack of it. Your presence is always speaking for you. So, what is it saying?